I know I'm going to open a can of worms by asking this question, but was the Echo series bad? Let's talk about it. What's going on, guys, and welcome back to another daily discussion. Today, I wanted to talk about the Echo series. Why? For a number of reasons. Primarily because I just finished it, and I haven't gotten a chance to fully divulge my thoughts and opinions. So I guess you could kind of consider this a little bit of a mini review, as I haven't done like a full review on this channel. But if you guys do enjoy this kind of content, and you like the daily discussions and just talking about TV, movies, and a variety of things in gaming, drop a like on this video. Let me know in the comment section how you feel about these, and we'll continue to do them. But without further ado, let's jump into talking about Echo. And I want to talk about this show in kind of three parts. I want to talk about the good, the bad, and the WTF, because each category definitely had moments in this series' 5-episode run that I had a lot of thoughts about. But we're not going to focus too heavily on the bad. We're going to start by talking about the good. And one of the best things I found about this show was obviously in Alaqua Cox, who plays Maya Lopez in the series. Her performance as Maya in each of the 5 episodes, in my opinion, I found to be gravitational. I found to be intriguing. Definitely one of the most interesting characters I've seen within the MCU in a long time. She has such a unique past, such a unique culture, such a unique history, that I felt like there was a lot there that they could continue to do with this character, whether they give, Echo a season 2, or if they decide to go in a different direction and have her team up in a different show. I feel like there's a lot that they could potentially do with this character, but watching her throughout the 5-episode run, I found her character to be just super interesting. There was a lot that I enjoyed about her complexity. I found, a lot of parallels with some of my other favorite characters, right? Like, off the jump, I thought about some other complex characters. Like, you kind of think about Batman a little bit. I thought about Punisher. I felt like she recognized and related a lot of her struggles, and a lot of her kind of traumatic history to what I kind of recognize with Punisher, as well as Daredevil. Like, all of these characters, ironically enough, fall within the same kind of operate within the same, general area. And I think for her character, someone that has such kind of a tumultuous past and kind of a traumatic history, and once again finds themselves manipulated by Fisk. Now, obviously, this doesn't, Daredevil doesn't necessarily count in this regard, but I mean, Punisher definitely was someone that had a traumatic past, and if you watch the show, kind of gets manipulated by Fisk, who promises them something that they don't, he doesn't necessarily deliver on. And so, but in terms of like both of these characters, I found that between Punisher and Maya, both of these characters have traumatic pasts, they have a history, and they're just trying to find a way to kind of move forward through that pain. And that's a journey that the character themselves goes on, that you kind of tag along with, that you get to witness that and you get to see. And I think through that process, you kind of grow not only a deeper appreciation for that particular character as they go through this journey, but I think we relate to these characters a little bit more because they're not characters that are from the jump inherently good. And they're not characters that even towards the end of the journey that we witness them on are inherently good, right? They still are characters that may work in their own self-interest due to just these deep survival instincts that they've had to develop. Or they may be a character that has, that attempts to do the right thing, but occasionally will steer off the path and make a choice that negatively affects them throughout the series or the show or whatever. And so, but they're complex characters. And I think the thing that people relate to the most about these characters is that they're real. They're real characters that have experienced real issues and real traumas that we may be able to relate to in 1, 2, or multiple levels. And I think that that's what kind of draws us to them. At least it does for me. So when it comes to Alaqua Cox and her role as Maya, I think she did a great job of illustrating that pain and illustrating that kind of internal battle that the character is having to face throughout the process. So I would say probably for me, the best thing about this show was that aspect of it. But we got to talk about the bad. And one of the things that I felt like the show struggled with, I felt like the pacing was good in this show throughout its 5 episodes. I felt like with the episodes that they were given, they had strong pacing. However, I feel like it is also within the fact that there were 5 episodes that the show kind of almost struggles with its pacing. I feel like there once you get to the end of episode 5, I feel like there was clearly a bit room for them to do a little bit more, to go a little bit further, to dive a little bit deeper into some of these characters, her relationship with Fisk and things like that. And I think because of the fact that they only had 5 episodes, I truly feel like the show really struggled to create an identity for the future. I think it did a great job of showcasing Maya and her past, her roots, that deep integrated culture, from the Choctaw people. I felt like that was really great and highlighted in the 5 episodes that they were given. But I feel like with those 5 episodes, it really did feel like, it really felt like a backstory. Like those 5 episodes really felt like just highlighting the backstory of Maya and her history, where she comes from, as she tries to understand it a little bit herself. And by the time you get to the end of episode 5, I truly felt like they would have done a better job with having 2, maybe 3 more episodes. No more than 9 for sure. But I feel like 2 or 3 more episodes definitely could have given them a chance to, now that she understands her abilities, be able to, utilize that towards whatever mission that she's trying to achieve, which is obviously, getting back at Fisk, and then towards the end of the episodes, getting kind of away from him and that sort of thing, which only, she's only then forced to come back, which again, just made little sense to me. Yeah, I feel like the pacing was strong. They had good pacing with the 5 episodes, but I just feel like once you get to the end of episode 5, the series felt unfinished. It felt like there was more that they could do. It felt like there was a lot more opportunity and a lot more room to grow for this character. So I feel like they definitely could have done a better job with having a few more episodes. Now, when it comes to WTF moments, for me at least, there weren't a lot, right? I think that, the show had some good points. It definitely had some bad points, but I think in terms of WTF, I feel like the ending was really one of the moments where I was like, what the hell? What the hell is happening? I feel like the show had great pacing and it had a great flow, probably for the first 3 episodes or so. Episode 4, halfway through, I felt like, okay, I kind of see where you're going, but I also know in the back of my brain that there's only one more episode, so I don't know how you're going to wrap this all up in the 5th episode. And when you look at the timestamps for each episode, from episode 1 to episode 5, every episode got progressively shorter. And so it felt like the first episode was, I think, its longest episode of the series. And then episode 2, 3, 4, and 5 just got shorter and shorter. And it felt like they just had less and less time to do things with. I feel like, if they were going to have a long episode 1, I feel like episode 5 could have at least been close to an hour as well. But episode 5, I think, was 30 minutes once, you take out the credits. And so I feel like there was just the ending and her final fight with Fisk, maybe it's just me. Maybe I just didn't understand it, but it confused the hell out of me. I was not completely sure what was happening in that moment. And I feel like Fisk, when it comes to Alaqua Cox, has just been defeated so easily, where, and I know it's a different, I know it's different companies, right? I know it's not on Netflix, right? So they're providing a different look at Fisk. They're not making him completely overpowered, but it just feels like between what I've seen from him in Hawkeye and what I've seen from him in this show, it just does not feel like it's the same Fisk. And I know it's technically not the same Fisk. Well, it technically is, because they just revealed recently in a trailer that Daredevil is canon, which means that Fisk being in Daredevil is also canon to this universe, which means that technically it is the same Fisk. And so if that's the case, the fact that it just feels like he's just getting bodied. You're not seeing nearly as much of his ferocity and his tactic nature and his cunning as I was seeing in, his time on Daredevil. And so I think when it comes to my biggest WTF moment with this series, definitely has to be in the fact that it just felt like the finale just felt so rushed. It felt like the show had great trajectory getting up to a point, and then it just completely kind of flopped and let itself go. Now, did it open up some opportunities for the future? Yeah, I mean, that post-credit scene definitely opened up some opportunities. More than anything, it opened up opportunities for Fisk that's likely going to tie into Daredevil. But in terms of like Maya and her story, it felt like that kind of was wrapped up in a bow, and they could potentially go with, take it in a, another direction, and kind of flesh out that world a little bit more, or they could go in a different direction and completely tie that up all together and say, okay, maybe we'll see her in a cameo at some point in another show, but as far as her story, that's kind of it. That's definitely what it felt like for Maya, and I wish that they had kind of opened the doors for a little bit more progression of that character, or at least some big cliffhanger that we'll see in season 2. But I feel like, in terms of, WTF moments, another thing that kind of got me was the fact that they released this show in 5 episodes. I feel like, with the fact that this show was so short, I think this is a prime candidate for a show that could release weekly. Now, I know some people will say, I think because it was 5 episodes, it's great. I would have preferred that they dropped it all at once. And I think that there's definitely some pros to that, for sure. But I think that part of the reason I feel like they dropped all 5 episodes at once is because I think they themselves didn't necessarily have faith that people were going to stick through this show if they dropped it weekly. So I feel like they said, hey, it's only going to be 5 episodes. Let's start something. Let's try something new. And we'll see, let's drop all the episodes at once and see how people react to it. Do people watch the whole show if it's all dropped out at the same time? And I feel like, yeah, the likelihood was probably much higher that people would stick through it than looking at this downward slope of if the show released every week, which I feel like they probably made. That was probably a primary decision, a primary reason for that decision that led them to drop all the episodes at once. But, that was an area where I feel like they definitely could have dropped every episode week by week, and that would have been good as well. But, I think, when it comes down to it, you look at all these details. Was Echo a bad show? I don't think it was. The reviews say it was. It's scoring pretty low overall, even though, in the last couple of days, it's definitely raised up a little bit in its score. But overall, it's still one of the worst reviewed MCU shows outside of Secret Invasion, which I think it just slightly edges out. And so, but for me personally, I feel like, for what it did, the episodes that it was given, I don't feel like Echo was a bad show. Was it for everyone? No. But I think when it comes to the Marvel fandom, I feel like the Marvel fandom is looking for something very specific, looking for a very specific, character, whether it be a character or a story or a plot, or, or a heavy on the action. And some of these shows that Marvel's been doing have been a lot more heavy on, I think it seems like they're trying to push a little bit more in terms of the overall plot for the show, than it is for the actual action, which I think, in past MCU projects, we've seen a good balance between the two. Whereas lately, it seems like these shows, specifically Secret Invasion, was definitely heavily centered on its plot, which, if you're going to focus your show primarily on a plot, it has to be a strong plot. And I feel like when it comes to Secret Invasion, for example, it just wasn't. When it comes to this show, it had a decent plot, but I feel like it didn't stick the landing, and that's where the show really suffered for me. I don't think Echo was a bad show. I feel like it did its job. It had great representation, probably some of the best representation, not only for the deaf community, but for the Native American community. The Choctaw people were heavily represented in this series, which I think was incredible. I think the show tried some new things, dropped all the episodes at once. The action was edgy, their first mature rated show. I think Echo will go down in history when we look back on it as a show that really tried a lot of new things. Some of those things worked, some of those things didn't. I think in terms of the TVMA rating, I don't feel like, for me personally, the show really was that mature. I think, yeah, there's definitely a lot more blood than you would have seen in other shows, but in terms of like it being like a super mature show, I still feel like Daredevil and Punisher were definitely some of the more mature shows that Marvel has ever produced. I think Echo kind of, it's close to that. Definitely not a show that's not for children, but also at the same time a show that I don't think was like TVMA, but that's just me. Overall, guys, I don't think Echo was a bad show. I think it had some pros, definitely had some cons, as I previously stated. And I feel like if they had a second season, there's definitely room for them to grow in the future. But let me know what you guys think. Do you think, Rye, you're absolutely crazy, this show was trash, you don't know what you're talking about? Or do you think, hey, I feel like you make some good points. There was some good stuff about the show. There's also some not so great stuff about the show. Let me know in the comment section below. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy the daily discussion type videos, just us sitting and having a conversation about TV, movies, gaming, all that stuff, let me know in the comment sections by dropping a like, commenting on this video, subscribing, all that good YouTube stuff. And as always, thank you so much for letting me entertain you, and I will see you in the next video.